this is one that I'm really, really excited about. Now, of course, we set up the elements of a playbook at the beginning of the day. There was the profile, which we covered in our company session, learning about the story behind mission, vision, values, all of that. There was the policies session that Chris just got out of. There was people that we covered earlier today as far as managing people, and Dan coming in, bringing crazy amounts of value with the whole people planner process. And now we're getting into process. So here, I'm going to talk with the CEO and co-founder of Bombus. Let's see if we can get David Heath to jump on here. Now, this session is going to be incredible. Bombus is a $250 million behemoth in the sock game that scaled out of, here he is, door-to-door knife sales and a Facebook post that lit an idea light bulb and a crowdfunding campaign. There's a lot we're going to dig into. What's up, man? How are you?
What's up, Jonathan? How are you? Good to see you, man.
Good to see you too. All right, we're going with Dave. I see your Zoom name there.
Let's do it.
All right, Dave, welcome. Welcome to Playbook 2021.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I'm excited to be here.
Now, when I was learning about your story, I couldn't help but realize you went to Babson. Fantastic college.
I did. Thank you.
Both. So my brother went to Bentley and I went to Bryant. So between us, we were the trifecta of the Northeast business schools. That's right.
That's right.
All right, man. So I did just mention the door-to-door knife sales. I was so pumped about hearing that little bit of your story and how that like attributed to just learnings of you kind of, I don't know, honing your sales skills, right? Because without the ability to sell, do you have anything?
I mean, I look back on honestly everything that I've done, from, slicing deli meat to, washing cars and, ultimately selling knives. And I think back at that as literally the single greatest career training I think I've ever had. I worked for Vector Marketing Corporation, which sells Cutco, which people might be familiar with. And their sales training process was just incredible. And you're kind of out there and learning how to handle objections and, working on the fly. It really, I still use a tremendous amount of those skills today.
Yeah, I really think that like the two most valuable experiences for anybody are like door-to-door sales. It's tough these days. You kind of like with social distancing and everything, you're not really doing the door-to-door thing as much. Remote work is kind of flat door-to-door. Well. But I do remember growing up and like going to door-to-door for fundraisers and then trying to like do a landscaping business and things like that. But it's such a learning experience, and working in like retail or restaurants and the grind and the multitasking that you learn from that.
Yeah, totally agree.
All right. Well, we are not here to really explore your knife sales and like your record-breaking numbers that you did through college there. We're here obviously to talk about Bombus. So can you let's just level set everybody who might not know about Bombus. I hope everybody does, but what would you fill in our attendees here? What is Bombus?
Yeah, so we kind of position Bombus as a direct-to-consumer premium basics brand with a mission to help those in need. So direct-to-consumer, we're a business that has over 95% of our revenue direct through our bombus.com channel. Premium basics, we sell socks, tees, and underwear. And then a mission to help those in need. The whole business was founded around this quote that I learned, that socks were the number one most requested clothing item at homeless shelters, and, really being inspired to, want to make a difference in a small way in my own community, never really thinking that it would scale to kind of what it is today. We employed the Bombus, the Tom's buy one, give one model. So we donate a pair of socks for every pair of socks that we sell. And underwear is the number 2 most requested clothing item. So we launched that earlier this year, and t-shirts are number 3 items that people wear closest to their body, typically put on first thing in the morning. And similarly in the homeless community, because they're wearing them close to their body, a high degree of wear through, don't have access to washing machines. And so this sense of dignity, but also, try spending a day without socks, tees, or underwear would be really, really challenging.
Yeah. I mean, the things we take for granted, right? Perspective is everything, but that's 100%. Beautiful. Now I know when you did see that post, you read that quote and it sparked that idea to really like have this mission and develop a model for this and go down this path. I did learn that it took 2 years actually of like branding, product development, exploring product market fit before you even launched anything. Like what Let's talk about that timeline. What kind of went down in that 2-year period from the spark of the idea to getting ready to like start selling?
Well, this may surprise you and everybody listening, but I did not come from a sock magnet family. I didn't grow up working in the hosiery business. So when I kind of learned this quote, I actually didn't even work in apparel. I didn't work in manufacturing. I'd never created a single product in my entire life. So I kind of was really starting from ground zero. And, I think it was really the fact that actually I had zero experience in this industry, that I kind of came at it from a unique lens of a customer, right? And I sat there and I said, okay, if we're going to donate a lot of socks, we need to sell a lot of socks. And if we're going to sell a lot of socks, we've got to create the best product in the world. And so we started thinking about like, where can we create innovation? Where's the white space in the market? And I started by just going into stores and looking at what sock product existed in the world. And the stuff that I was really familiar with was, the cheap, white or black tube sock you're getting in a 12 pack in a big plastic bag at TJ Maxx or Costco or Walmart, which what I come to learn drives about 85% of the basics market is like mass market commodity, Hanes, Fruit of the Loom, Gildan, Jockey, whatever, type of brands solely focus on price, right? And trying to give you as much quality or comfort that they can for that price. But if you're familiar with, buying socks, they're really cheap. And so our hypothesis was there's all this technology and innovation going on at kind of the premium athletic market, performance, high-end running, cycling, basketball, hiking, outdoor ski, and things like seamless toe arch support, comfort footbeds, moisture wicking and temperature regulating fabrics. And I sat there and I was like, athletes aren't the only ones who need to feel comfortable and supported all day long, right? Like if you're chasing your grandkids or you're a nurse or a firefighter or you work in an office and you're walking around all day, it's kind of like the idea of a mattress. If you spend 30% of your life, sleeping, might as well spend some money on a good mattress. Well, similarly, you spend about 60% of your life in, some form of socks or underwear. Like, why not treat yourself to something that's really good? But the market wasn't really delivering that. So I spent 2 years basically ripping things apart, being like, I like this, I don't like that. I went all over the world to try to find some of the best, manufacturers and get in the door and sell them on this idea. And then of course, all comes back to figuring out, okay, how do we donate socks as well? And so this 2-year process of like, what do people care about? I remember days of where like, I became that like weird sock guy at the gym because I'd like bring samples with me to the gym and I'd go up to people on the treadmill and be like, hey, sorry, you don't know me, but would you be willing to try my socks on? And I would get a lot of really strange looks. And I had to be like, no, this is not like a fetish thing. Like, this is like, I'm starting a company and like, we got to donate socks to the homeless community. And eventually like people who didn't even know me would come back and be like, yo, those socks you gave me are awesome. Like, how do I get more? And I'm like, well, they're not for sale. So like, give me your email. And when we launch, I'll like email you. And that's ultimately, I always tell people, like, if you were unlucky enough during that 2-year period to sit next to me on an airplane or a train, like you just heard me like rattle off stuff to you, like, oh, what do you think about this? And, but it's funny enough, like that kind of like hustle mentality is what drove a really successful launch and Indiegogo campaign. And I still get emails from folks today that are like, you probably don't remember me, but like I sat next to you on an airplane and you gave me a pair of socks and like, these are my favorite. I'm so excited to see all the success. So that was kind of like our founding story on the product side.
That's so awesome. I don't know. I think you might have to go back to a little guerrilla grassroots marketing there and just return to the roots. The gyms are reopened. You got to like just start hustling and throwing socks at people on the treadmill again.
Jonathan, this whole thing is all about scale. That doesn't scale anymore.
Sometimes the unscalable is the most successful, right? At least for a bit. You got unscalable sprints. But no, that's a good segue. So how it was just you and Randy at the beginning? Your co-founder, Randy Goldberg?
Randy, and I had 2 other co-founders are kind of like silent co-founders. My brother, Andrew, and another one of our partners, Aaron Walk, kind of like co-founders behind the scenes. It's really hard to tell a story about 4, guys. It's much easier. We just kind of picked the 2 of us that I'd like to think it was because we were the best looking and had the most charisma. But no, I think our natural positions as CEO and kind of chief brand officer made it obvious.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, Chris is my brother and our CEO, and I'm the CMO. So similar kind of split of like personality and probably like responsibility dynamic in the business. Curious how that it was just natural in terms of like, you're the CEO, you're the like operationally minded, process driven person. And he was kind of more about the brand and the visual and the like, how'd that shake out?
Oh, so with Randy, that it shook out that way. My brother is like, I'm left brain, right brain, like he's like a numbers guy. Like he's one of these like people who can like solve a Rubik's cube like in a minute without like, I'm just like, I don't know how like people like breaks complex problems down very quickly. And I've always been like the middle child who like had to like hustle for everything. Right. And so like, early days, like knife salesman, like all these like weird things. Like I never followed a traditional path. And so, I mean, I came up with the idea. So I think very early days, I kind of had born this and pulled each individual together. I said, all right, I know if we're going to create an apparel brand, the biggest moat that you can create at scale is around brand, right? Because anybody can rip your product off. Anybody can, tout the same value proposition. But the one thing that is so hard to copy and emulate is a really authentic brand. So I was like, Randy, we worked together for 6 years at a media startup. I watched like the genius that he, put into kind of building and telling brand stories. And I was like, you need to be by my side. I was like, I'm not good at numbers. So like, I know we're going to have to build a financial model and there's going to be operations complexity to supply chain and all these other things. So I was like, Andrew, you're going to come and run that. And then Aaron, who was a good friend of Randy's, was kind of the yin to his yang from a brand side, where Aaron is like our creative director who kind of brings all the visuals of Randy's kind of strategy and voice to life. So the four of us kind of had a, pretty equal part in kind of our skill set, but also uniquely overlapped in our core values and the things that were really important to us, which is why I think all four of us are still in the business today.
That's awesome. And how long was it just the four of you?
So for the 2-year period of product development and brand building, and then for the first 6 months, it was also just the four of us. And then we hired our first full-time hire, who was originally started as a consultant, who's actually still with us today. She's my chief of staff and head of communications, named Emily Hofstetter. We were looking for a generalist, and this is, I think, a really great segue into this kind of process part, right? You had the four of us knuckleheads kind of each focused on our own little like unique skill set. But we didn't have anybody who is kind of like tying the pieces together, who was kind of beating the drum of like, all right, you're doing this, and coordinating, almost like a project manager. We kind of refer to it as GM early on. But just somebody that we could kind of be like, all right, here's my feedback. She could kind of tie it all together and keep us like really focused.
All right. And so that was before the Indiegogo launch, you said?
No, 6 months after.
6 months after. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So 6 months after the launch, you hire your first employee. And then when did you get to your first 10?
First 10 was by the end of our first full year in 2014. Shark Tank was a massive accelerant for that. Once it grew organically for the first 12 months, we launched in August of 2013. And then Shark Tank happened in September of 2014. And so during that period, we didn't raise any money. Like we were just kind of bootstrapped the entire way. We relied on all of our relationships in media to get PR. We were, handing socks out at gym, kind of the old like hustle way of just trying to get our product out there. Thankfully for us, we had a really strong Indiegogo campaign. So we had a pretty, decent sized customer base from that. And those people all came back and rebought, and we found ways to kind of re-engage them to spread word of mouth. But again, we didn't have a marketing budget. But once we kind of saw the line of sight to potentially being on Shark Tank, we were like, okay, well, we need to hire customer service. We need to hire marketing. We need to hire, operations people. This was going to be a real business now. We've done about $1 million in revenue in our first 12 months. And then Shark Tank happened and we did $1 million in a month and a half. So we did about $2 million in our first full year. And that was a wild accelerant for the business. To kind of grow overnight like that was just crazy.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was literally going to say wild accelerant. So I'll say gas on the fire. But of course, that's how we connected, was through Damon, and he has been nothing but your biggest megaphone as far as I'm concerned, and so proud of the fact that he always talks about that Bombus is like the number one brand out of Shark Tank, right? But there is something that a lot of people don't know, and that's that you didn't apply to be on Shark Tank, right?
That's right.
They recruited you for the show. And I don't even know that actually happens, that they're like out there casting for Shark Tank.
No, it actually, I mean, surprisingly it does. I mean, if you're a fan of the show and you watch the show and you see it, actually through Kickstarter and Indiegogo, they do a ton of recruiting, because basically they see, oh, these products are doing really well. They've sold $1 million in the first 30 days or whatever. And they get to also see if the founders have any charisma in the videos that they produce. And they also get to see if the comments as a general population relate to this product. So I think they use that as kind of a good filter. And so you'll see a lot of brands who are like, we ran a successful Kickstarter, or we ran a successful Indiegogo campaign. I bet you 99% of those have been recruited by the casting team.
So interesting.
Yeah.
All right. So Shark Tank is your gasoline, and you see that you have to actually build out marketing department and an operations department and a customer support area. And you've got to start scaling manufacturing and R&D. And so, tons of new problems to solve in the business and new places to scale.
Yeah.
When did you really start thinking about, needing process to ensure scalable consistency?
Well, the interesting thing is I think we got to almost like redefine process, right? Because process for me, and I think in the startup world, process gets a really bad rap, right? I think people, especially employees, right?
Feels too rigid, right?
Yeah, they hear the word process and they're like, "Ugh, that's why I left that big company. I don't want process," right? The process that they're referring to is bad process, right? Process that's like process for process sake. Oh, if you go get a coffee, make sure to bring back the receipt. What? A $5 coffee? You're going to that means that you then have to input. I remember the company I used to have to tape receipts to the back of a piece of paper. And I'm like, do you realize you pay me $130,000 a year? And for 2 hours out of every month, I'm taping receipts to the back of a blank piece of paper that I then have to photocopy and then email into who then that person has to log a $5.35 cup of coffee expense into it's just like mind-blowing inefficiency for bad process, right? But that's because they don't trust their employees. They don't have good process in place. So I think process is fascinating because, in the early days, when you're all sitting in one room, right? The process for making decisions is, hey, this email came in. It's Shark Tank, right? There's a process to, hey guys, I just got an email from Shark Tank. What do we think? All right, this is the pros, these are the cons. That's how process works in the early days. You just kind of get it done. When you start to scale, that's when you have to start thinking about process for scale, right? And this is where process actually becomes a benefit to the organization, because all of a sudden, a CEO today managing 185 people, I can't have everybody running into my room every time that they get an email and say, hey, I just got this email. What do you think we should do? Right? It would never scale. Right. And so then you have to have a process for saying, okay, these types of decisions you have, autonomy to make, right? If it's this type of decision, it goes to your manager. If it's this type of decision, your manager escalates it to a director or a VP or a senior, that you start to just naturally build out process that works throughout the organization. But it's good for people early on to just be aware of the fact that the process naturally starts to exist, even when you're two people, right? And sometimes we're brainstorming over lunch, or I'm going to go meet with this, rep to sell our product, whatever that is. You figure it out because you're in close communication. As you scale, you just have to figure out, okay, there's bandwidths now on resources like time, and capital or whatever else. And now you have to start to set up these processes. But the most important part is, asking yourself, does the process help or hinder? That's the lens that every good, I think, CEO or executive or manager needs to think about before implementing process. What's the intent? What's the reason behind it?
Amazing. I think everybody listening right now, like, I'm sure you have tons of takeaways from the whole day. There's been a lot of content here, but make sure you write this down and make sure that either tomorrow or next week you are auditing what are the processes in your business that are obstacles for people, that are inefficient for people, that are blockers, and what are the ones that are like stepping onto a moving walkway? What gets people going a little faster? What creates what creates efficiency? Processes, scalability, right?
Exactly. I think about manufacturing, right? This is an obvious area where you can put process in place, right? It wouldn't make sense for every single manufacturer that we bring on to start from ground zero and take them through holding their hands and say, here's what our product looks like. Here's what our brand means. So we create processing, an onboarding process. And we say, okay, here's all of the information that you need to know about Bombus, the brand, our attention to, product quality, detail. This is how each product is made. This is our levels of quality acceptance rating. It needs to be within this cost structure. And that we get just to send them, right? We don't have to kind of explain it to them every single time. That's a process that enables scale and allows us to bring manufacturing partners on at a much faster rate.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So did this come natural to you? I feel like for a lot of entrepreneurs, process is something that like you might feel like you're good at, but when it takes time to actually like document something or explain something, it's like never the top thing on your list. And so process often becomes more reactive for growing businesses than proactive.
Yeah, I definitely think in hyper growth, right? When you're growing, our early days, we were going 400%, 300%, 200%, 100%, it's like measures of scale and volume that you're just like, how do we keep up with everything? And ultimately, either process naturally starts to, feed into the business because you're like, I literally don't have enough hours in the day to kind of, continue to do this manual task, right? I think you think about manual tasks as you scale a business and, you think longer term, hey, is there a process or a technology solution or some sort of system that allows us to kind of automate this thing and move it along at a much faster rate? Then there's other things that I think become forcing functions, right? We went through one earlier this year where, 2 years ago, we were 60 people. We ended last year at 110. We're now 190. In a 2-year period, all of a sudden, you had large amounts of people deep within different organizations in the company who didn't have a clue as to what other people were doing elsewhere in the company. And it used to be 60 people. Information transfers very, very easily among 60 people. There's this. I can't remember exactly what the name of the law is, but it's something of like 150 people is like when people no longer, have direct relationships with each other. They can't manage more than 150 direct relationships. And so you start to think about, sorry, my headphones died. Am I still good on audio?
Yeah, I can hear you. You're good.
Yeah. Okay, great. And so you start to think about, okay, how do you make sure that knowledge and information is transferred throughout an organization? And we kicked off this process, which was we're still working through it 8 months later, called our blueprint exercise. And it's a 3-year plan where we basically require every executive, every VP, director, and manager to basically lay out what are their key objectives for the next 3 years, all laddering up to 5 key objectives for the organization. And that could be kind of continue to grow the main business, attract new customers, focus on retaining current customers, impact in our mission, and building operations for scale, whatever. Those are generally the highlights for ours. Yep. And now everybody within the organization should be working on key objectives that ladder up to 1 or 2 or multiple versions of those. And the reason you do this is so that there's this point that the executive team can say, all right, the marketing team thinks this is a priority, but the technology team thinks this is a priority. These 2 people are going to be reliant on each other because the marketing team is going to need stuff from the technology team. The technology team is getting requests from all parts of the organization on products that they want them to build and all these things. And so now we as the executive team have to set priorities and then communicate that all back out to the company to say, hey, here's what we're focused on for the next 3 years.
we didn't have to do this shit early on, right? We just you kind of everybody knew what they needed to do, because it was all it was acquire new customers, sell socks online. And that was it, right? Now we've got underwear, t-shirts, geographic expansion, our mission site has 3,000 giving partners. There's so much more complexity in the organization today that we need process in order to streamline information to make sure that people can still remain autonomous. And there's this idea that, and I love this quote, and I think everybody should write this down. Think about providing context, not control, right? Because control doesn't scale. And we've all worked for managers who've tried to tell us exactly what to do, right? And inevitably, we never get it right because we're not them and we're not doing things exactly the way that they're doing things. And ultimately, we get frustrated and we're like, screw this, I'm out of here, right? I don't want to be told what to do. I'm not a button pusher all day long. I've got a brain, I've got ideas where I can think on my own. So the job, I think, of a good manager, an executive or leader is to tell people, hey, here's what's important to the organization, and here's the role that you play in that. Here are our core values. Here's how we make decisions on the ethics and things that we believe in are right. Now you go make decisions against this, right? And if you provide enough context, people don't need to be told what to do.
Love that. Context, not control. Everybody take Dave's advice, write it down. Context, not control. That's something that, personally, as we scaled, right? The last 3.5 years, we went from 5 of us to now almost 70 of us. And it's been an amazing journey, and had to learn along the way to over communicate, to over document, and to over provide context, because it is not scalable if you were trying to micromanage and control everything. It's a fear-based versus abundance-based mentality. And you need to provide opportunities for people to make decisions and sometimes fail and not do it the way you would do it, but that's okay.
Totally. I also believe that if you're not failing, then you're not trying hard enough, right? Failure is part of the journey, right? And I'm a big believer of celebrating failure, because that means that people are actually trying, rather than, again, I'm sure we've all worked places where people are too afraid to fail and then nothing gets done.
Yeah. I was talking about this on a run the other day. It was just people being afraid to get something wrong, but there's no right unless there's wrong. Right? There's no salty unless there's sweet. You have to have that duality, and you have to live in the middle, and you have to bounce back and forth to know which direction you need to go.
Totally.
Now, you said 150 was that kind of point for you where you were really feeling like you needed to implement some of these things that you didn't have to do at the beginning. But at 190 now, I've also heard you say that at 180, at a team of 180, in 7 years, only 6 people had left the company. Is that still true at 190?
I think it's 9 now, or maybe 10, something like that. I've kind of lost count because, it's still a very small number.
Yeah, but that's still insane in 8 years, right? So 8 years now at 190 in, 10, maybe 9 or 10 people have left the company. How have you managed your people processes to basically allow this to be a company that nobody would want to leave?
Yeah. I mean, not to sound like a broken record. I mean, again, I think a large part of this is that context versus control. But I think, look, early on, me and my co-founder sat around and we had this crazy idea to build a sock company. And we said, you know what? We can't control our financial success in terms of size and scale over time. There's a product market fit. Are the customers going to like it? They're not going to like it. We're going to have to adapt, whatever. We said the one thing that we can control is how we treat our people. Because Randy and I had come from a place where we weren't treated very well and kind of battle scars and took that as motivation to create a really great place to work. And we thought about all the things that we didn't like as employees, right? We didn't like being told what to do. We didn't like being kept in the dark on information. We didn't like feeling like, it was our privilege to work for the company, right? Which we kind of flipped all this stuff on its head, right? And the first thing that was a massive realization to me was, if you want to build a great business, you need great people, right? This goes after the product market fit, because all of this stuff starts out early on, which if the customer doesn't want your product, throw it out and start over. Like that's the kind of the bare minimum. But once you realize that you have an opportunity and customers are telling you that they love your product, they love your brand, and they want more of it, and you're starting to set up for scale, I'll tell you the one, and it's going to sound really simple, and it's not, but it is like condensed. Like the key to success is hiring great people and then managing them really well. And the way you hire and retain really great people, you got to remember this. The most talented people in any job will never be unemployed, right? Because they're the most talented. So people are always going to seek out the most talented people for a specific role. And so when you start to remind yourself of this, right, you flip the narrative of saying, I pay you to come here, so you do the job that I tell you to do, right? And you flip it to say, I am so lucky that you allow me to pay you to come here and share your talents and dedicate your time and your career with us. Like how fortunate am I as a founder and a leader of an organization that you have decided to take all of your incredible talent and pour it into my dream of building Bombus. And so when you start to think about that, you start to realize that talented people need context, not control, because they're talented, right? Like they don't need to be told what to do because they're really smart and they figure it out. You also start to realize that if you remind yourself that they're human beings first, right? And as human beings, I know it sounds crazy to think, and especially in the US, market, but people have lives outside of work, right? And if you show your employees that you value their lives outside of work more than their lives inside of work, they will show up to work so much more passionate and so much more dedicated. Because if you force them to take time off, or if you do little things like, send them a baby gift when they, have a baby, or one of our employees, her apartment burnt down. And she didn't have renter's insurance. So we took $15,000 and basically helped her buy brand new furniture, right? If that was a stress in her life, and she was such a top performer, it was a stress in her life that we just made a little bit easier. And retain $15,000 to retain a great person over 8 years is a drop in the bucket. So you start to think about these things, and it doesn't need to be money, right? I actually think it's more about, I actually tell people one of the easiest way to retain talent early on, remind yourself that when you worked for a company and you had a founder or a CEO that you looked up to and admired, right? It was hard for me early days because I always thought of everybody as my peers, right? And I still do to the most part, right? I go out and I have drinks and I try to make it approachable. I still meet every new employee who joins the team to say hi. I try to really spend a lot of time remembering everyone's name and kind of what role and department they're in, to remind myself that, again, these are people. But I have this practice where every Friday I block off an hour to send emails out to people throughout the company. And now today, you want to talk about process? I have all of my executives or managers and directors feed me kind of highlights from people who had wins or were suffering from challenges personally or professionally that week, right? And I take 5 minutes to write an email and I say, hey, Joe, I heard you killed it on this project. Really great job. So happy to have you on the team. Keep up the great work. It takes nothing and it's free. That person goes home and tells their friends, their spouse, their family, I got an email from the founder and the CEO recognizing the incredible great work that I did. I feel so good. I feel so seen. I feel so motivated. And it takes nothing, like absolutely nothing. So there's these free ways to kind of motivate your team, which I think a lot of people think that you motivate with a stick. And I like to believe you motivate with a carrot. And I mean, I could go on for hours on this topic because I'm incredibly passionate about it.
I would love for you to go on for hours about this topic. I mean, we do have Shaq coming up next. So I think we do have a hard cutoff point in a few minutes here, but I would love to reconnect and talk for hours on this because the last 6 minutes or so of what you just said is one of the most golden things said here today. And that's just so important and incredible. And I love that perspective. Yeah. Just go the extra mile for, it does not take a lot of effort to make people happy, and making people happy is what makes them want to stay.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Now I do want to ask, because you said you had no idea what you were doing as far as making a product, manufacturing, right?
Running a business.
The thought of this, right? I've never done that either. I have a background in media production and filmmaking, and now we have a software company. But the thought of making socks or like a treadmill or something, like a physical thing, I would have no idea where to start. Right. And then there's so much complexity to the R&D and the operations and the like sourcing of materials and then the scaling of those operations. Something had to have broken in the process along the way. Like what comes to mind as far as learnings through scaling Bombus through all these different phases?
I mean, shit's breaking every day. I mean, you can't, like, I said this before and I'm going to reinforce it, right? Like, I know we're still growing because we're breaking stuff and we're failing all the time, right? God, I just don't know where to begin. I'm so like overwhelmed by the question because there's so many examples. I give you probably one of the most tangible examples. I think it was Q4 2018. And we had just brought on a new warehouse partner. And this warehouse partner was much bigger than the one we had moved from before. And they worked for some really big brands. And I think we took everything that they said at face value. And we were like, oh, they're great. They've done this before, right? Like, and we kind of gave them our forecasting and we're like, look, but we're a growing business. We don't really know. I mean, it could be 30%, it could be 80%, it could be 200%. Like we need to Q4. And they assured us all of the systems and everything was buttoned up and they had as much people that they could throw at the problem if we scaled. And one of in peak holiday season, like between, just after Black Friday, between Christmas, this order system reconciliation piece got broke and there was no monitoring in place. So we were accepting orders for about 7 days that weren't getting transferred over to the warehouse. And now, meanwhile, the warehouse in Holiday is stacked to basically get through a day's worth of orders in a day, right? And it was like, why would you add any more capacity than that? And so we started hearing from customers, hey, I ordered 5 days ago, 6 days ago, a week ago, and I still haven't received my order confirmation email. And we were like, oh, that's weird. And we looked and there was this backlog of 7 days of orders. And so we contacted the customer, we contacted the warehouse, we kind of figured out this issue and we're like, all right, well, what do we do? Like the customer service team can't possibly respond to tens and thousands of customer responses saying, where's my order? Where's my order? Where's my order? I want a refund. You guys stole my money. It was like, it was really bad. And so I made the quick decision. I was like, look, we're going to take a short-term hit on this. We're going to bulk mass this 30,000 orders that were missed, and we're going to refund them. We're going to tell them, hey, this was missed. And we're also going to give them the value of their refund as a gift card to come back and rebuy. So we were basically giving them a full free order because we had kind of bungled it up. Cost us about $3.5 million, in a year where I think we were doing, 60 or 70 million. It was a pretty big hit, but the response back from customers who are like, the majority of people who are like, I don't mind waiting. I understand there's problems, totally appreciate this. That cohort of customers from a legacy standpoint outperforms in lifetime value something like 2x to any other cohort of customer that we've ever acquired. And it's because we went that extra mile. And if you see a theme here, right, it's always go above and beyond, go above and beyond for your people, go above and beyond for your customers, go above and beyond for your community, your mission. It's taking this incredibly thoughtful approach of really reminding yourself of if I was the customer, right, and I was on the other side of this, it's holiday times, stress is high. Yeah, at the end of the day, do I sit there and I'm like, did I ruin Christmas because somebody didn't get their socks in time? Probably not. But I try to put myself in their shoes and say, what would engender loyalty for me as a customer going forward? And if somebody had reached out to me and said, hey, deeply sorry, we can't get to your response. I know you probably asked about something. We had people who were like, I was just asking about what colors they come in, and they all of a sudden got a full refund, or, all these things went above and beyond. And again, kind of do the right thing by people. And I think, the right thing will be done by you over the long term. That's
an incredible story.
But that was a massive failure.
Well, I mean, initial failure.
But guess what? We've never had a Q4. We've never had a Q4 where we've, bleeped up that much before. Again.
There you go. You learned from it. You put the process in place, hopefully.
We put a lot of process in place.
Oh, that's fantastic. No, I think that's such an important point to end on, is like a lot of people do get so caught up in just like the short-term numbers and metrics and what might be like good for the business or me today, versus taking a step back and thinking like, if I was this person on the team, or if I was this customer or this prospect, like truly what is the best experience that you can provide for them? What would you want if you were in their shoes? How would you want to interact with the sale? How would you want to interact with the leadership team and know that they care about your growth, right? All of that, just that mindfulness, to step into somebody else's shoes and then reflect that in your actions, so wildly important.
Yeah. I think the one thing that I love leaving entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs on with, because I think it's a PSA that probably doesn't get spoken about enough. Anybody who's kind of been interested in entrepreneurship over the last 10 plus years, I think has been dangerously brainwashed by the media. And look, I came out of the Shark Tank generation, and you have the profit, and you have, all of these, look at the cover of Fast Company or Inc. or whatever. And for the longest time, entrepreneurs were celebrated by how quickly they can make a big business, right? Yeah. And I think about the brands that I love, right? I think about the Nikes, the Patagonias, the Lululemons of the world, these great heritage brands that endure the test of time. And that is the marker of true success, is not how big you can be in a defined period of time. Again, it's why we never raised a lot of capital, because we were never interested in chasing vanity metrics about, the company's worth $1 billion or $2 billion or blah, 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 like on paper. And look, how many of those, stories that people raised $150 million at an $800 million valuation and they don't exist anymore, right? Because they were so focused on the ego and the vanity metrics that came along with building a business that looked big on the outside. We just kept our heads down and we said, we don't care how big we are over a period of time. We just want to build a brand that people love with a commitment to our mission, where we treat our people really well. And our goal is that if Bombus is still around 50 years from now, regardless of size, then that's true success for us, as long as people still love the brand. And so I want to tell everybody, like, don't get brainwashed by trying to build your business or scale it indefinitely. Some businesses just don't scale, and that's fine, right? My dad built a business that was like $5 million, but he owned 100% of it, and he started it with $5,000 as somebody who moved here from another country. And that was great scale for him, right? And here I am, I built a business that does over $300 million, but like, I'm not any more successful than my father is, right? I just happen to be in a brand or category that we got lucky and we've done things the right way. But don't, just focus on the key things that matter. Produce a great product, treat your customers really well, treat your partners really well, treat your people really well. Define really good core values of things that mean something to you and things that you would never compromise on. I guarantee you will find success over time.
Well, that's a hell of a way to end the session, Dave. Thank you so much for the last 40 minutes, for all the value that you brought here. Thank you for your mission and the company that you're building. It's unbelievable. I know you've donated 40 million plus socks at this point, 50 million plus. So just incredible. Love it.